to hear from Palestinian workers, industrial workers working in industry parks, meeting with the heads of the Palestinian clans, the sheikhs. They're saying behind closed doors, we wish Israel were leading this part of the region. That's a big jaw-dropping thing to hear, and that's not just picking and choosing people. That's just across the board. A largesse of that community wishes that Israel were leading.
And now a word about our sponsors. At the heart of the Jewish people is a promise that ensures our traditions, values, and future endure for generations. The Jewish Future Promise is a movement I endorse. It is a moral commitment to securing that future. By signing the promise, we commit to keeping Jewish life vibrant and thriving for the next generation. Join me in shaping the future. Make your promise today. Sign the promise. jewishfuturepromise.org/sign the promise. Hello, and welcome to Think Twice. This week we have an interesting and timely conversation for you with Heather Johnston of the U.S. Israel Education Association about Christian support for the Jewish state, as well as the role that education plays in spreading hate against it. But before we start today's program, I want to remind you, as always, to like this video and podcast, subscribe to JNS, and click on the bell for notifications. Also, you still don't have to wait a full week for more of our content. There is a Jonathan Tobin Daily podcast where I share more news and analysis with you about the most significant issues we're facing today. You can find the Daily Show under Jonathan Tobin Daily on the JNS channel, wherever you get your podcasts. And now to today's program. At a time of an unprecedented surge in anti-Semitism, where can American Jews look for friends? It can't be to the traditional allies of Jewish liberals on the political left and among minority communities. If anything has been made clear since the Hamas-led Palestinian Arab attacks on southern Israel on October 7, 2023, those groups have largely betrayed the Jews, since they are now mainly to be found among the ranks of the intersectional left that not only gives tacit, if not open support to Hamas, but also is engaged in the demonization of Israel and its supporters. They are the ones who are targeting Jewish students on American college campuses. The answer as to where Jews can look for friends during this crisis is obvious: to Christian conservatives. For decades, Christians have been at the heart of the pro-Israel community, lending political, moral, and even financial support to Israel, even as many on the Jewish left refuse to recognize them as allies. The partnership between Jews and Christians ought to be a given, since they both ought to understand that the point of the toxic left-wing ideologies that are fueling anti-Semitism is a war against both Western civilization and the values of the American Republic. But what is even more important than an acknowledgement of the stake that so many Christians rightly understand that they have in the war on Israel and the Jews is the fact that it is these same Christian allies who are exhibiting leadership on the issues that are driving this conflict. Christian groups are among those who have rightly identified that education is the reason why Palestinian Arabs continue to refuse to give up their century-old war on the Jews, and in spreading understanding about the importance of the alliance between the United States and Israel. One group that is at the heart of this effort is the U.S. Israel Education Association, and we're fortunate to have its leader with us today to discuss the effort to bolster ties between the two nations and the factors that are continuing to contribute to both the hatred against Israel and Jews elsewhere. Heather Johnston is the founder and CEO of the U.S. Israel Education Association, a nonpartisan organization that educates and serves senior government leaders to advance dialogue and cooperation between the United States and Israel. Since 2011, she has led tours for senior members of Congress to Israel and facilitated and hosted briefings and forums on Capitol Hill. She's also established Israel's National Leadership Center with the city of Ariel, where over 100,000 Israelis have undergone training. She's also the author of the book Uncommon Favor, chronicling her journey from ordinary life to faith and the world of international politics. Heather Johnston, welcome to Think Twice.
Thank you. It's great to be with you today, Jonathan.
Well, Heather, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. I want to start by asking you not only about what the U.S. Israel Education Association does, but what drove you to found it when you did begin it years ago?
Well, we started back in 2011, and we had been involved with the state of Israel, I guess, for really the last 28 years. So in the late 90s, and real involved in the city of Ariel, where we had built a national leadership center in partnership with Mayor Ron Nachman, who had founded that city. And it was just real abundantly clear after being there for 13 years that where's the Congress? Where's the U.S. officials? Nobody was coming through there. And so I think it was on that note, and having built that strong relationship with him, he is a mentor of mine, it really just became clear that we should begin those senior level trips for Congress through Judea and Samaria. And as you may know, Jonathan, the U.S. State Department would not fund those trips. They would not allow our U.S. officials to go beyond the Green Line into a Jewish community. So we kind of broke through that glass ceiling and knew that needed to happen. And we're really glad we did.
Yes, well, I think it's been very important. Now, it's been obvious for decades that Christian Americans, Christian conservatives are integral to the effort to promote support for Israel in the United States. Do you think that's still the case since the October 7th atrocities? Do you feel that there's been more support, a lessening? What do you do in terms of taking the temperature, driving the activism?
I think it's such an important question to be asking. And I would just say that I don't think that support has wavered that much. I think that, we have certain organizations that kind of can ebb and flow at times, which can look like, well, where is everybody? But that does not take away from the strong and united Christian evangelical support for the state of Israel. And the reason I say that, Jonathan, is that people are not supporting Israel just because they like Israel or because they're a nice democratic, aircraft carrier for us in the Middle East. It's not that. It's really by conviction. It's by a sense of Judeo-Christian values rooted in the Bible. So it's very personal. It's very spiritual for people. And so you're not going to change that much. Now, nobody likes war. Everybody wants this war to end. People want the hostages home. So that frustration on this protracted war, frustrates people. But it doesn't take away from the support, I don't believe.
I think that's a really important point, because at a time when much of the corporate mainstream media has been sort of acting as Hamas's stenographers in terms of the way they portray that war, there has been the impression that younger Americans have been, lessening support for Israel because they've been so influenced by it. And I guess the question is, are younger Christians, younger evangelicals following that same pattern as the rest of the country, more people accepting the narrative about Israel as the villain rather than the victim?
Well, I do think war skews people's vision and understanding. I would say that if you've got strong evangelical families and children that are growing up in those families, they're going to likely adhere, even if they have a little, span of time where they are in disagreement with what's going on. I think it would be a far-flung assumption to say, well, the youth are just going the way of the buffalo and they're just going toward another angle and position altogether. I would not be that pessimistic about that. I disagree with it.
Well, I think one of the things that your group has focused on is education, and that's certainly key to the question of how the United States operates in the Middle East. Now, one of your group's key initiatives is what you call the Aegis Fund, which is an effort to combat the indoctrination of young Palestinian Arabs in hatred for Israel and the Jews. Why is it so important, and how much resistance have you encountered to this?
Well, Aegis is called the Alternate Gazan Education System, and it really is a large idea. And we brought it to Congress about a year and a half ago, once this war began. And we brought it to the Israeli government, quite frankly, and also to the U.S. administration once President Trump took over. And it really is the idea of being able to look at these Gulf Gulf nations and those that have already done a great deal to completely scrub clean their curriculum and their education system, including their mosques, like the UAE, who did that back in 2001 after 9/11, and they have really held to their guns on that, and to look to those nations to play a role in an upstart in the removal of UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, out of that dynamic entirely, as they have been indicted for their nefarious activities. Now you're looking at what is that international coalition that can play a role in going forward? Could we, at this moment, at long last, be able to see a different education system in the Gaza Strip, inside Judea and Samaria, where the refugee camps, 120,000 people claiming to be refugees, but are also terrorists and infused with terroristic ideology. East Jerusalem, where Israel just shut down the entire school system because of this training in terror. So we have brought this idea, and we are working with the Israeli government, with the U.S. administration on this to bring these key nations together that can play a positive role going into the future. Very, very exciting. And I would just go ahead and say that I think within 3 months, Jonathan, we're going to see a pilot, a test pilot, literally inside one of the safe zones in the middle of the war that's going on. They're going to start educating. And I believe we're going to see a shift and a change with 10 schools to begin with, and then moving all the way up to 522 schools. And I think it's going to take place over a period of time, but the key stakeholders are excited about seeing this happen.
Well, that is exciting. But of course, the one thing that pops to mind, other than the fact that that could be a game changer if it really spread and took hold, is that it can't continue unless the control of the Gaza Strip is permanently taken away from Hamas and the people who are in charge. Indeed, it's not much different in much of Judea and Samaria, where the Palestinian Authority is in charge. Mm-hmm. This can't happen unless the war is actually won by Israel. Absolutely. There's no question about it. And aren't we thankful that Prime Minister Netanyahu and that government continues to stand strong and truant about the complete removal of Hamas from their powers, going into exile, whatever they need to do. They cannot be running and stalking the Gaza Strip. And so, yes, under the conditions where you're looking at a new reality on the ground, we will see a change in the education system, which is fundamental, central, ultimate, and basic to any changes going forward. But I would like to say that Israel is going to be standing there for quite a while. They're not just going to walk out of the Strip. So they're going to be there with their troops. They're going to have safe zones. They're going to begin to move Gazans into safe zones. In fact, they already have. But once they tease Hamas out of those areas, they can already not just bring humanitarian aid in safely, but they will be able to administer or to work with these international education contractors to come in and change this situation. Well, that is key to it. If Israel isn't there, it won't happen. I think that's pretty obvious. My question to you, as someone who works with members of Congress, who is sort of on the ground trying to spread the word about this, do you think many members of Congress really understand this? Because so many of them continue to sort of parrot the same lines about what the future of Gaza, the territory, should be, about a two-state solution, about somehow that there's some alternative that seems to be more magical thinking. Do they really get this? Well, I think that largely, and now we have a Republican majority, of course, in both houses. But I do think that if you were to stand, I was just in a meeting last week with a big group of Democrats and Republicans. I don't think people are adhering to a Palestinian state and that we're looking to that as the solution at this point. I think this war has been a turning point. Now, I'm not saying things can't turn back to that position. I'm just saying that people have backed off on it. And most people, I would just say across the board with Congress, regardless of Palestinian state or no state,
they want to see a change in the education system. Everybody realizes this is the most ultimate and central thing that has to happen going forward.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. Now, you've correctly identified UNRWA, the UN Refugee Agency for Palestinians, as one of the most important sources of the problem. Yet most of the world only thinks of it in terms of aid to suffering people. How misleading is that understanding of its role in perpetuating the conflict?
Well, UNRWA was in charge of the Gaza Strip next to Hamas. They were running concurrent on everything from sanitation to education to, I'm not sure why they gained the entire largesse and the stronghold of the Gaza Strip, but they did, and it was not like that in other parts of the world. So this has been exposed to the utmost degree, as you can see, and now they are no longer in position to have the trust of the Israeli people, really, in the region. So they have been moved out, and now you don't want to leave a vacuum there. So it's super important. We've got members of the Senate right now that are working with the ambassadors in these international Gulf states to say we've got to move something forward and we've got to move quickly. We don't want it to be filled by some nefarious entity that just comes in and decides to take over the education. So I think it's going to be a very deliberate and intentional effort to get this started as soon as possible.
Yeah, now that's a really important point because President Trump withdrew American support from UNRWA in his first term. It was returned under Biden in that administration. And now, obviously, Trump has a very different view of it. But yet, in much of the media and certainly in the international community, UNRWA still is considered a charitable group, not the group that has basically helped perpetuate the conflict. For 77 years. I mean, there's one refugee agency for the whole world and one just for the Palestinians. And the other refugee agency resettles refugees. UNRWA keeps them in place, keeps them there as props in this endless war against Israel. How well, I guess I'll just drill down a little more. How well do you think members of Congress whom you work with and talk to understand how deep, the role that UNRWA is in making this war go on?
Well, I don't think that they understand the depth that you would have, or maybe that I would have. I don't think that everybody gets it at that level. For example, UNRWA is still in Judea and Samaria. They're still in the refugee camps running the education program. So that still hasn't been taken care of. So we've got them out of Gaza, but we don't have them out of down the street. Do you see? So even that has not been settled yet. But I do think that they have been exposed, and it's hard to be a Democrat or a Republican and go, this is jihadist behavior. This is not normal to be housing rockets intended for Israel under the schools. And so certainly they've been exposed. Some people want to hold to just that strong entrenched position that, well, Israel deserved that. Well, that's not the role of UNRWA to decide that. They're supposed to be an independent agency in the world today, and they have clearly shown the world that they will stand with the Islamists, that they will stand with the jihadists, and they will come in and interdict and support terrorism. So I think that you've got a large part of the U.S. Congress today that really does understand that. It's been exposed, and then others that would just hold to an entrenched position.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think the plain fact of it is that Hamas had already fully infiltrated UNRWA. UNRWA's policies were already, really favorable to Hamas and to that terror state that it led from 2007 to 2023. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to sustain that in the face of the evidence.
Yes.
Now, you've led many tours for members of Congress to Israel and to, across the Green Line, as you said before. What have you learned from those experiences about the way that Americans respond to Israel and the way this allows leaders to experience the reality of the Middle East as opposed to what they might get from, reading the New York Times or the Washington Post or watching CNN?
Mm-hmm. Well, it has been real different than what I thought it was going to be. Let's put it that way. I think the number one thing to know is that there was an incredible lack of information, knowledge, and understanding of that part of the region. And so when you don't ever go there, you don't understand it. And while we're brokering a Middle East peace process with that as the centerpiece, the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, nobody had ever been there. So how do you really negotiate? How do you understand that in process and be able to think in an equitable way? Well, I think one of the first and foremost things was to show that there are, there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that actually want to or are working with Israelis. And until this war began, we had 150,000 Palestinians working for decades in industrial parks. Nobody knew that. Nobody thought ne'er the twain shall meet is what people thought. And so I think there's that strong group of Palestinians, and I know that there's that percentage out there, 85% would have, attacked Israel. I'm not sure that at the end of the day, you would have had all 150,000, Palestinians ready to go attack Israel when they're all their bread and butter, all their livelihood and prosperity is dependent on that. And that doesn't take into account, Jonathan, the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other Palestinians that wish they were living a life much more prosperous than they are. I think they are under a tyrant. I think that they get persecuted and dragged to jail if they take a stand or if they vote the wrong way on a poll of any kind. So people are terrified. I think that's a reality. And I think the Congress has seen that, the plight of the Palestinians today, those that want to be out from underneath the headlock of this terrorist organization, the Palestinian Authority. And I think that they've been able to go through and see the demographic realities, the extreme importance of Israel's security in that area, the security fronts, like the city of Ariel, when we gave the Sinai back and Israel ran to go get that mountain range up there that's so critical for Israel's security. Well, all of that becomes very apparent on a trip as we're going from place to place, meeting with mayors and leaders and understanding much more deeply that arena. So we go to Hebron every time we go. We meet with the Palestinian business leaders down there who would give anything if the Palestinian Authority was not leading them. Anything. And that's where half of the GDP comes anyways, out of Hebron. Half of the Palestinian GDP comes out of Hebron. So there's a lot to see and understand that Congress certainly has never laid their eyes on. So that's been an important goal of ours, is to help expose in an equitable way what's going on.
And now a word about our sponsors. At the heart of the Jewish people is a promise that ensures our traditions, values, and future endure for generations. The Jewish Future Promise is a movement I endorse. It is a moral commitment to securing that future. By signing the promise, we commit to keeping Jewish life vibrant and thriving for the next generation. Join me in shaping the future. Make your promise today. Sign the promise. JewishFuturePromise.org/sign the promise. Can you think of an example from one of the trips where you really just saw the light bulb go on over the head, if you're figuratively, of some members of Congress who might have come to the region with one set of ideas about what it is like, and then realized what it really is, and sort of an emotional connection or an understanding of an issue that really illustrates how these trips work?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think at the beginning, as we were leading members of Congress, they came into cities, not settlements. When you hear that word settlement, you think tents on mountaintops, and they were coming into what looked like suburbs of San Diego. So that was a big, huge shining point and a big illustration to them. This is not what is perceived, or what the way we're perceiving it. And so that was one thing. I think another very big thing is just to hear from Palestinian workers, industrial workers working in industry parks, meeting with the heads of the Palestinian clans, the sheikhs, and they're saying behind closed doors, we wish Israel were leading this part of the region. And so that's a big, huge, jaw-dropping thing to hear. And that's not just picking and choosing people. That's just across the board. A largesse of that community wishes that Israel were leading. So I think those are astonishing.
Yes, indeed. One of the other main initiatives of your group is called something you call friendshoring. What exactly is this, and how does it work, and how is it good for America as well as for Israel?
Yes. Well, even as this U.S. administration really led the Abraham Accords treaties, and as President Trump is in the region, you're watching just the desire of these Gulf states to be in relationship with the United States. And really also, apart from this war, they would like to be benefiting from Israel. And so I think in the growth of those treaties, our organization took on what is something relevant that could happen. And if you'll recall, Jonathan, back to COVID-19, when another nefarious world entity was at the fore, which is China, of course, and just to the utmost degree was exposed for the way that they handled the United States with our pharmaceuticals right in the middle of a pandemic, and we began to lose supply chains. We still have lost supply chains to this day. People just aren't talking about it. But more and more and more, China continues to have a headlock on the United States. So we just brought the idea that if we're going to grow the Abraham Accords nations, and we've got staging grounds for manufacturing in Morocco, in the UAE, who has put billions of dollars to attract pharmaceutical industry there into that region. Saudi Arabia will also would be a major player. But the idea of being able to put a staging ground there for U.S. Active ingredients for pharmaceuticals. And so we have brought that to the U.S. Congress, to the U.S. administration. It has received huge bipartisan support. We now have a piece of legislation to put the first FDA office into that region. So if you think we've got 3 FDA offices in China, we have 1 in Europe, 1 in South America, none in the Middle East. And so the whole notion of putting technical assistance there and opening up for business in that region with our allies, that's what friendshoring would be, moving out of China, a large part of that manufacturing, bringing back to the States what we can, but then there's that dropping off point where it's too prohibitive financially. Let's move it with our allies and get it out of China.
That's a really important idea, especially since China is the United States' main geopolitical rival, enemy, as well as what happened under COVID. But integrating that with the Abraham Accords, I think, is an illustration of how not letting the Palestinians permanently veto peace is something that can be good for the people of that region as well as for the United States.
Yes, very much so. And I think that this U.S. administration will adopt this as America First policy. And they already have given that signal that why don't we open a capital investment fund around pharmaceuticals with the Abraham Accords nations? We've done it on minerals with the UAE. We're creating all of these opportunities. Why not create an investment fund that allows people to invest there and to make money? It's another business deal for the Abraham Accords nations, but this one is extremely important. If you can imagine that our 40 top pharmaceuticals that we take from Advil to our penicillin is made in China, it is frightening. And we've done nothing about it to this point. Nothing since COVID. We've not changed one thing about what's taking place. So I believe we will see those changes. I'm anticipating those under this administration.
I can't think of many things that would be more important than doing that, but it's interesting that this is not an issue that's gotten a lot of coverage in the mainstream media, or really any at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that you have to kind of you've got to socialize the understanding of what this would look like. It is a major foreign policy move to go out of China to the Abraham Accords nations. It is a $5 trillion industry. It is not something that you just decide overnight and we'll just run over there. There's a lot to it, and we have taken the deep dive as an organization to do the legwork, to go meet with all the leaders in the UAE, all the primary leaders in Morocco, to understand what do they have that the United States can benefit from. what is the situation there? We've had to put together this the composite for it to get a white paper finally put out there, socialized. Things don't happen like this overnight. It's usually a 5 to 10 year process. But I think we're well on our way with the legislation with bipartisan support in the House and Senate. That should pass within the next few months. That will require the FDA to set up shop and an office somewhere in the region.
How have the pharmaceutical companies reacted to this idea?
Well, I think that it depends on which pharmaceutical companies that you're talking about. I think this U.S. administration is going to force the hand of the pharmaceutical companies in the United States to do the bidding of the American people, as you can see. So we're watching that, and without getting too deep into that, I think that the opportunity that is there for them to make money in our ally nations. There's an opportunity for investment. There's an opportunity to grow the situation capital-wise and to make it an attractive policy for pharmaceutical industry. And that's what the U.S. administration is going to have to figure out.
Mm-hmm. Have they been trying to stop it?
No, they haven't. I think that the pharmaceutical industry has not tried to stop this at all. No. I think that the whole notion of getting out of China, it's become dangerous to be there. It's hard to leave because the money's there. But if you can go to Morocco and you can keep your IP, your intellectual properties, and you can make money there at the same level or a little bit more or less, then why not do that?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, you've been in the forefront of both support for applying Israeli sovereignty to Judea and Samaria and trying to persuade Americans to call the territory by its right names rather than the misleading West Bank. Mm-hmm. Are you optimistic that the Trump administration is supportive of this or open to it? And are its efforts to win over various Arab nations, such as President Trump's current tour there, an obstacle to this objective?
Well, I don't know that we could call it an obstacle. I would just say, when we think about it, Trump, it's hard to believe, but President Trump has been in office for 4 months only. Think about what it took, Jonathan, to get the Abraham Accords nations treaties. That was 3 years into his administration. So I think in the effort, while in the middle of war is going on, you're not going to get anything done. You're not going to declare sovereignty in the middle of war. You're not going to really actually get Abraham Accords treaties in the middle of war. So what can be done now while this war commences? Well, he can build and work with the Abraham Accords Gulf states and see what we can build, start growing, trying to, create strengthen those allies. And I think that's one of the reasons for why he is there. I think that as far as Judea and Samaria is concerned, I would draw it back to the Israeli government. Where are they? Because the U.S. government's not going to put a hand out there for Judea and Samaria if the Israeli government's not. And I think for the Israelis, it's about fourth on the list. Number one is Iran. I could actually say number one, number two, number three, number four is Iran. But if you actually, wanted to go in order, you could say Iran is first, and the dealing with that and getting rid of their nuclear program. Number two would be finish the war in Gaza, completely remove Hamas from power, get the hostages back. Number three would be to build with these Gulf states, that is these Abraham Accords, because it is on the agenda of the president of our country to make sure that we're doing that. So that puts it up to number three. And then I would put sovereignty as number four. So when you think about all of that, it's a little down the list. And I think we can get there. We can arrive at that. It makes sense to a lot more people than it did before. And I think the U.S. administration has already shown the favorability of having that happen. If you'll remember, the peace plan that Donald Trump put out, Peace to Prosperity, it was the largest comprehensive plan, and it included Israel's sovereignty and opening up the doors for so much in that region for the Palestinians. And it was just, it was just thrown in the trash upon arrival to the Palestinian Authority. So anyway, I think we may see as these Gulf nations develop and grow and come into more oneness with the United States, we may see that they drop their strong stance against Judea and Samaria as Israel takes a stand and wants to come in and they want to come into normalization treaties. They're going to have to go with Israel. Israel needs to come out of this war victorious. They have to win. And if they win, they become so strong in the region, you see. And so that just opens up the doors of possibilities for Judea and Samaria.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. I think people kind of get it, reverse it. Now, one of the sort of, I think, false talking points about this issue is this idea that Israel has to put aside the idea of extending its sovereignty over at least even parts of Judea and Samaria in order to get normalization with more of the Arab and Muslim world. But I think that's kind of, looking at it through the wrong end of the telescope, in that normalization is only possible once the Arab world realizes the Palestinians aren't able to continue to go on vetoing, normal life with Israel, holding them hostage, holding their prosperity and security hostage to their fantasy of destroying Israel. Mm-hmm. That's the point I think that has to be made.
I think so, too. I'm completely in agreement with you on that. I think that there's no reason for Israel to compromise there. They have every reason to not. And they have made it, this war has brought out to the utmost degree the evil intent of the Palestinian Authority.
Mm-hmm. Not just Hamas, but also, that's a very important point.
The Palestinian Authority, and how incapable and impotent they are to even deal with Hamas down the street from them, right in the neighborhood next to them. They are weak. And so I think that when you start talking about why would you prop up a situation that's so failed, and you've got Jordan next door with 60% Palestinians. Are you going to have two Palestinian states? No. So there's no real good reason to continue to press for that. I think that the new Saudi crown prince will be amenable to compromise on that. I have a feeling, and I'm trusting so.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But of course, the public stance, and even that of, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, they speak about wanting a Palestinian state. But in private, I think those of us who cover, the region really know a little bit more about it. That's the last thing in the world that they want, is another failed, state, which would almost certainly be taken over by Islamists who hate them, who hate Arab moderates as much, if not more, than they hate Israel.
I don't think the Israeli government is sweating this out. I really don't. I don't think they're worried about that. I don't think that's a big concern to them, Saudi Arabia, on this. I think they're far more concerned about treating and dealing with, in a thorough way, the Iranian proxy terror network and, of course, the nuclear program that has to be dismantled. And, Jonathan, not just dismantled, but every drop of that uranium. If you talk to the nuclear scientists in the United States, they're like, this is a big job. This is not a small thing. You have to go in and take every drop of that enriched uranium literally out of the country. So it is a major situation, and going in to try to blow up the nuclear program is not going to work. It's so much more extensive than that. And so I think Israel is coming to terms with that with the United States, and they realize how important it is that the Iranians come to some conclusions themselves or face the music.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that is often made. Now, I guess the question I want to ask is, how concerned are you about the idea that there is some sort of debate within the Trump administration about whether or not to be tough on Iran or to accommodate Iran, let them have a quote-unquote civilian nuclear program in a country, that is awash with oil? Why do they need they don't need nuclear energy, as even President Trump himself has said. Worried that this administration may waver on this issue?
I hope that they won't. I think that that when you think about trying to put one iota of trust in the Iranian regime at this point, I don't know who could possibly trust them. They have not had one element of their track record that has been trustworthy. And we've been at a JCPOA, a nuclear deal, for a decade now, and they've shown themselves to lie at every corner, at every place, and even to this day, they're denying that they even have any enrichment. So I think that the Trump administration is under no illusions about that. I think it's more a matter of how do we go about getting rid of it. And if you talk to the nuclear leaders, and these are real conservatives in the United States, they would say this is a bigger deal than just going in and bombing the nuclear sites and trying to go about it that way. It's getting all of it dismantled and out of the country. And I think that's the better track to be on, which is requiring them to come to a degree of conciliation, Iran, on that, or they will face the crippling sanctions and they will face an attack. I believe that's going to happen if they don't. Well, consent.
I think President Trump has earned some trust from supporters of Israel, but the question is, we have to see how things work out, and there are no guarantees. And my last question, I want to ask you about your connections with the Jewish community. Now, one of the debates about, within the pro-Israel community has been how to engage with Christian supporters of Israel. Many on the left distrust Christians, or they just don't want to have anything to do because they disagree with Christians on other issues because they're politically liberal. What has your experience working with the Jewish community been like?
It's been great. I love working with the Jewish community on both sides of the aisle, and people with all different kind of perceptions. And I just kind of go on my merry way. We've been involved for 28 years. We have a great reputation inside the state of Israel. We've worked with Israel's Ministry of Education and really all the government agencies. And I think that, as far as I'm concerned, we need to stand together in this hour. I don't care what kind of person you are and how different our opinions might be politically. At this hour, we need the Judeo-Christian relationship to be strong, and I am all about it. And I work to strengthen that relationship.
Well, I think you deserve the support and the thanks of the Jewish community and the pro-Israel community for doing so. I think it's very important that there be no strife between these two communities because the stakes are much, much too high in order to allow that to happen. Well, Heather, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, to learn more about the U.S. Israel Education Association, you can go to usieducation.org. We also want to thank our audience. Please remember to tune in every day for Jonathan Tobin Daily Edition. And whether you're listening to us on any one of the various podcast platforms, watching us live on Facebook or X, or on the JNS YouTube channel, please like and or subscribe to JNS, click on the bell for notifications, and give us good reviews. Please write to us at thinktwice@jns.org and let us know where you listen or watch the show and what you think about it. And remember, keep reading and thinking for yourself, and we'll see you again next week. And thanks again to our sponsors, the Jewish Future Promise. Sign the promise at jewishfuturepromise.org/sign the promise.